morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Missouri Public Transit Conference. This year, we are coming to you virtual, so please, we apologize for any glitches, but we have a whole team of people behind us helping to make this happen this year, and we are so excited to have all of you join us at 8 a.m. this morning, bright and early, to kick off our conference. I'm going to turn over our first general session to the president of the Missouri Public Transit Association, Mark Mehmert. Mark, thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you, Kim, and welcome everyone to the 2020 Virtual Missouri Public Transit Association Conference. My name is Mark Mehmert, and I am the president of the Missouri Public Transit Association, and in my day job, I'm the director of transit for the city of Jefferson, also known as Jeff Tran. I know this virtual conference is not what you envisioned, but I wanted to thank you for joining us this morning for this first ever virtual conference. So we get to do something unusual and initial. So that's in some ways good. Special thanks to our conference committee, including Janine Clampett, Chance Gallagher, Cindy Baker, Dorothy Yeager, and the MPTA Executive Committee, as well as MPTA staff. These folks have worked tirelessly to ensure this program is worthwhile for all participants and keeping our members and our friends safe at the same time. I'd like to take a quick moment to recognize all those MPTA board members who are here today. Their leadership has been instrumental in elevating the work of the association over the last year. MPTA board members, if you wouldn't mind waving, just waving briefly to be recognized. We appreciate your commitment to public transit in Missouri. You're doing tremendous work, and we appreciate that. Over the next 2 days, you'll have the opportunity to shape policy, develop networks, and collaborate to share knowledge and new ideas for transit in Missouri, especially in light of the challenging times we are experiencing with COVID-19. MPTA was established in 1980 to provide a unified voice for public and specialized transportation providers in Missouri and to work toward elevating the status of public transit as a priority. This conference is one example of our work to ensure transit has a voice in Missouri and recognize the essential nature of transit, now more than ever. We welcome your active participation not only in the conference, but also in future MPTA activities. Special thanks to our sponsors who helped make this event possible. Our gold sponsor first, Transloc. Silver, Citizens for Modern Transit. Bronze, Commute with Enterprise and BYD. And our conference champions, Cape Girardeau Transit, Oates, SMTS, and Southern Bus and Mobility. Welcome to this conference, and thank you again to our sponsors who are making all of this possible. Let's take a moment to hear from Transloc, our lead sponsor, before I turn it over to FTA Administrator Mokhtee Ahmad for a couple of words.
Welcome to Transloc, Ride Systems and Double Map, the most trusted names in transportation technology, powered by Ford Mobility. We're glad you're here. We encourage you to discover how public, private, and campus transit agencies are connecting their communities. We partner with over 1,500 transit systems in the United States and Canada. You too can partner with us. We foster collaboration to identify how public and private transit can offer riders the best possible experience. We explore new possibilities that build a better world for us all. Together, we can bring the best ideas and solutions to your customers. From demand response flexibility to fixed route reliability, our software and technology can help you provide best-in-class service. We also provide second-to-none customer service to you. Our robust customer success team is ready to help you make the most of your software. What's your challenge? How can we help? Where do you envision your system in a year, 5 years, a decade? We can help you get there. Thanks for stopping by, and we look forward to talking to you.
Thank you again to our lead sponsor, Transloc. We very much appreciate you taking the lead at the MPTA conference today. With that, I'd like to ask Mokhtee to say a few words, the Region 7 Regional Administrator. And Mokhtee, we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Kim, for your leadership in bringing us together to this first virtual MPTA conference. According to this program, hopefully after this conference, the association will be able to shape policy, develop networks, share knowledge, and to create new ideas for transit in Missouri, especially in light of the challenging times we're experiencing with COVID-19. I'm looking forward to hearing the remarks from Patrick McKenna, the MoDOT Director, regarding state funding. I also want to extend a warm welcome to Scott Bogren, Executive Director of CTAA, who will be discussing the status of federal funding, reauthorization, and continuing resolution. I will leave that discussion of funding to both Patrick and Scott, and instead I would like to focus on COVID-19 and the impact on transit in 2020 and thereafter. Before I move to this topic, I want to say thank you to the MoDOT transit staff for working with our FTA regional staff, Region 7 staff, to be the first in the nation to successfully apply and be awarded the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act grant in the amount of $61.77 million on April 10th, 2020, which also happened to be Good Friday. Indeed, it was truly a Good Friday. But it took a cooperative effort between both our staff to be the first in the nation to receive this grant. We are finding that 2020 to be a year full of surprises and uncertainty. 9 months ago, if somebody had told me that there was going to be an extended telecommute and working from home would be the norm, I would have rolled my eyes in disbelief. We started the extended telecommute in our Kansas City office in March. Now we have just completed 26 weeks of telecommute from home. We took our computers home and we've been successful in getting our work done. And across the country, we are beginning to see more and more employers beginning to allow work from home, and it's beginning to get accepted. In the first quarter of 2020, we were observing in the media about COVID-19 and the social and economic impacts that this virus was causing in the East and West Coast. Our knowledge was limited to what we were seeing in the media. We did not realize the seriousness of this virus. I thought we were going to be back in the office within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I thought this was a temporary thing, but now it's 26 weeks. Some of us did not know what COVID-19 meant. There were lots of misinformation, even to the point that it was associated with my favorite beer, Corona beer. That was not true. What I'd like to talk about is the COVID-19, what it stands for. CO stands for Corona, VI stands for virus, D stands for disease, and 19 stands for the year 2019 that this virus was discovered in Wuhan, China. It is now September, and the world has not discovered a vaccine for COVID yet. Everything is on experimental trial and awaiting results. However, now the fear is that as we approach the flu season, and yes, we can have what we call a twindemic of COVID and flu at the same time. So, as part of discovering policy and making policy, you all will have to face that. How do we protect our employees? How do we protect our passengers? What changes need to be made with the way we conduct our transit operations? What adaptations do we have to make with our buses? There's a lot of work that needs to get done. All we know now that the way to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and soon to be twindemic with the flu and this COVID virus. Washing hands, washing the surfaces, proper air circulation, wearing masks properly, not wearing masks, not having a mask just covering your mouth, but covering your nose, mouth, and social distancing. No hugging, new way to keep our hands clean and to also greet people. Things are changing. Businesses are closing. People are working from home. How does that impact transit? Hopefully, you will be able to come up with that discussion, come up with policies to try to handle that situation as we move through 2020. I would also like to introduce my staff. They will be presenting tomorrow at 12:30, and we have a new lawyer. His name is Jason Pollock. And Jason, if you would like to pop up on the screen, he came from KDOT, and we're glad to have him working for us. If you'd like to say a couple of words. Jason. Well, let's move on to Cindy Moses. She's our regional engineer, and she will be presenting also tomorrow. Cindy. I think that is not working. So let me just introduce the staff. Jeremiah Schuler, who is our program specialist, and Ava Steinman and Jerry Doyle, 2 new community planners, which we got from MoDOT. Thank you, MoDOT. They are turning out to be great employees. So as I leave, I want to say stay safe, be careful, and this is a virus not to mess around with. We are beginning to see what's happening at university gatherings. Keep your social distance, and hopefully we can go through 20 and 21 and meet this challenge. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Mokhtee. Very much appreciate your remarks and very much appreciate your leadership as well. I want to say how grateful we are to your staff for all the work that they've done in getting the CARES funding out and that act together. That is a fantastic work that your staff did. So we very much appreciate your leadership as well as their hard work.
Thank you.
With that, we'll start with our first session. Our first session is we want to welcome MoDOT Director Patrick McKenna. Patrick joined the MoDOT team in December of 2015. As Director of MoDOT, Mr. McKenna oversees all operations of the department. Prior to coming to Missouri, he served as the Deputy Commissioner for the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. He was elected to a 1-year term as the President of AASHTO, the Missouri State Highway and Transportation Officials, in October of 2019. Director McKenna, we look forward to hearing your state of the state on Missouri transit funding this morning. Welcome, Director McKenna.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks, Kim, and also want to thank Mokhtee and his team. Really, the partnership that we share running across the entire agency, entire state, federal, state, and local officials. It's really a tremendous partnership, and particularly in troubling times like we're in, those partnerships are even more important today. And we need to continue to strengthen those. I know the virtual setting that we're in is inconvenient, but it's possible. And I really do appreciate everybody leaning in and willing to participate in these sessions. I think it's vitally important to keep our work proceeding, our relationships strong, and the contact can be made and can be fulfilled. We can keep business rolling and we can do it safely. I think we're proving that. I wanted to start with just saying that we recognize the extraordinary challenges for the Transit Association, for all operators, for all the workers that are doing their very best to operate safely and to deal with the dramatic fall off in ridership and revenues. These are things we've experienced at MoDOT as well. Wanted to just run for a couple minutes through what MoDOT's been doing over the course of the last 6 months during this pandemic to respond to it. We also had big hits to our revenue early on as traffic volumes were down across the state. So the state revenue is comprised about 40% of motor vehicle fees, motor vehicle taxes on fuel. So that motor fuel tax, both diesel and regular, is about 40% of our revenue on the state side. And that was off as much as 50% in some of the early months with traffic volumes being down. We actually had a bright spot, which was the commercial traffic, as we worked with other federal partners to maintain that commercial flow so that the critical and essential materials and food supplies could continue to traverse the nation during the pandemic. So we didn't see too much of a fall off on diesel in terms of revenue, which was good. And then, we have license and registration fees. Those were temporarily off. We also have motor vehicle sales tax, and that was significantly off early and has come back fairly roaring strong in the last several months. So that's offset, but we were well off our budget in the past year. We were hoping for federal action to work on a backstop there, but we were preparing for the, I guess, the circumstance we're in, which is zero congressional action in this regard. And that's been unfortunate, but I think it's not to be unexpected, particularly with a national election coming up. Very difficult deliberations between the House and the Senate. But to make up for literally a $40 million budget shortfall as an agency. So that's a very difficult thing for us to absorb. But we did that, and we have done so for several months. We slowed discretionary spending, in fact, cutting our procurement cycle, cutting our purchase orders down by half over a 3-month period of time. That's materials and supplies unrelated to construction, but equipment as well. And that's a difficulty for us. We've got deferred purchases out there, but we're managing our cash. We also delayed advertising on about $360 million worth of construction projects. And that seems larger scale than what we're talking about in terms of the budget shortfall. But keep in mind, on the state share side of this, in some cases, we have construction projects that are only funded at a 5% share on the state side, typically about a 20% share. So we were cautious there. We've since released almost $310 million of that in terms of construction advertisement. So we're almost back on track there. And also we implemented what is called a shared work program. We did not want to impact employment at the department, but we felt we needed to spread across the portfolio savings so that we could keep our construction program running, keep our programs running, and our services functioning. That was about a 20% furlough. About 80% of our team went into effect, and we actually ran that for 12 weeks, and it just ended this past Friday, and our team did a spectacular job, I believe. All told, we balanced our checkbook. We did save the money we needed to. We did not lay off a single person. We maintained most of our services. About 90% of our services were maintained, even if a little bit slower than normal. And the crews are coming back to full strength this week and working through that. So we're really, the entire MoDOT team has really put their shoulder into this. And on the construction side of the house, really a bright spot in the economy, I would say. We are actually nearly $150 million ahead of this time last year in terms of disbursements to the private sector for construction services performed. So even during the pandemic, we've had one of our most significant construction seasons since 2010. So we're really, it's extraordinary effort, but we understand there's more to come in terms of the shared sacrifice and the work that needs to be done. We certainly recognize the efforts and issues on the transit side, and I want to say we recognize also that the state has not done a good job, I think, funding transit assistance over the past decade or more, probably over the past 20 years. We have had very difficult times making the case with the General Assembly. As you know, this is not direct state funding for transit, it's general revenue, and that's been woefully inadequate. We certainly understand that. The current annual $1.7 million state investment in public transportation, it's a fraction of the cost to provide the service. So transit providers are relying on these funds to help serve Missourians, but you're also making up that difference on your own through fare box recovery. And the state transit assistance program itself helps with that 80% for capital and 50% for operations. We have, for the last several years, requested additional funds from the General Assembly of $3 million to augment that $1.7 million. That generally hasn't even made it past the multiple governors' rounds in the budget. It's certainly a difficult year for general revenue coming up, but I want you to understand, and this is something where I'm really pleased to share with you. Some of you may be aware of this already, but just this past week by Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission action, the department, MoDOT, brought forward a budget request of an additional $6.7 million. That's a new decision item that we're requesting in what now will go on to the governor in the governor's request, and hopefully make it through there and onto the General Assembly for debate. But that would bring the total state transit assistance up to $8.4 million, effectively restoring the levels that were in force back in the early 2000s and that have fallen significantly. We feel it's vitally important to make that statement as a department that our transit providers desperately need assistance, particularly in this time, and we need to step forward and lead in that regard. So I'm really pleased to announce that that's something we've deliberated for a period of time, but frankly, COVID has crystallized the issue for us, and that's what we're doing. We also our transit section administering all of the federal funds and providing the financial and technical assistance to the 34 transit agencies and over 200 specialized providers throughout the state. We also have the Missouri Elderly and Handicapped Transportation Program. That's funded at about $3 million a year. Half goes to the area agencies on aging to support transportation for older adults, and the remainder goes to over 120 specialized transit providers servicing seniors or individuals with disabilities. As Mokhtee mentioned, the CARES Act, we're really pleased to partner with FTA and the regional staff to bring those grant monies forward, that's $62 million forward. That is now being dispersed actively. We have over $5 million have been dispersed thus far, and that is continuing to pick up steam. Our team's working with providers to get that money out the door as quickly as we can. And also the FDA provided urbanized area CARES Act grants directly to urban transit agencies, vitally important. That the funding attributable to Missouri in this regard is about $194 million, and about $30 million of that has been dispersed as of the end of August. We're also in the process of procuring new vehicles. The pre-bid conference was held on August 19th, and MoDOT will be issuing an invitation to bid this month. For this procurement, all vehicles will be gas powered, some with a hybrid option. So we're keeping an eye on the future though, and looking at innovations. There's a small all-electric transit bus that will be available in the next year. Though it's not in our current procurement, we're watching the progress closely, and the goal is to get that in and to be moving towards zero emission vehicles. You know, I had the good fortune this past year before COVID, earlier in the year, to testify before the Senate, U.S. Senate Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs Committee to try to express a lot of the concerns. We worked with Kim in the association and Joni and Michelle and our team to help prepare that, trying to bring forward some of the vitally important issues of the day. You know, we really emphasized, I tried to emphasize that safety is such an important factor in all we do. Here in Missouri, we lose, we lose nearly 3 lives a day. Nationwide, over 100 lives a day on our nation's roadways. And one of the best ways to move people safely is actually to get out of the cars and into the transit vehicles. It's a much safer form of surface transportation, and having people understand that, reduce congestion, improve emissions standards and air quality, all of the things that are important, and particularly in the urban areas, the economic development aspects. While in rural Missouri, I think it's still, even to many members, policymakers, when they first come in to the General Assembly, are shocked to learn just what a incredibly large rural transit network we have in Missouri, one of the largest in the nation. And that saves taxpayer dollars, and it really provides for hundreds and thousands of people to age gracefully in their own homes by having access to mobility options that they wouldn't otherwise have. It's truly, we are penny wise and pound foolish when we're not investing in our public transportation systems. These actions are vitally important. We really also tried to align the testimony with what we're doing at the National Association with AASHTO, with our reauthorization policy that we've forwarded. We have several priorities with regard to public transit. And the first is to increase and prioritize formula-based federal funding provided to states. That's really the heart and soul of support for local investments. We fully support and continue to support a separate mass transit account of the Highway Trust Fund. That provides a vital backstop and a firewall for the critical funding for public transit. We think that Congress should maximize and increase the formula-based program share of the federal program for public transportation specifically, including funding to address bus and rail modernization and rural transit. Another priority in reauthorization for AASHTO is to increase flexibility and reduce program burdens to improve project delivery. That is a broad topic, but in terms of improving project delivery, states want to streamline and expedite the current approval process for routine and recurring activities like bus and equipment replacement. That's an important factor. We also want to support and ensure state DOTs have the ability to harness innovation and technology. Innovative approaches such as cooperative automated transportation should be embraced to improve safety and provide resilience and secure surface transportation. This can really improve mobility alternatives for individuals who may be unable to or aren't served by traditional public transportation services. We also need to work together. This is a very important thing. State DOTs, infrastructure owners, and operators in the system really need to fight to preserve the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum for transportation safety and connected and automated vehicle deployment purposes. That's under assault by the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC has been trying to reach in and carve up that spectrum and effectively give it away to mobile phone providers. And we think it's important, vital for the nation's interest to protect that. We do have work to do to prove the utility of that particular spectrum, and we're working on that. There's also, I think, a pretty significant piece of legislation, rural transit Act in Senate Bill 4468 that was introduced in August. And the idea here is to increase federal contributions for operating assistance in rural areas with high transit dependency. It would increase the federal share from 50 to 80% for operating assistance in certain areas. That's vital to Missouri. That was part of my testimony when I was on the Hill. We're really pleased to see this in a bill that's now working through the process in Congress. We really applaud these efforts, and it's vitally important. You know, I'll wrap up here with just a discussion to say that we, where I started, we understand that these are some of the most challenging times, I would say, in the history for public transit agencies in our country. We have to work to support the operators and to support the employment of essential workers in this area. Even during periods of low ridership, we cannot let the temporary low ridership intercept the policy to support public transit, because we will get through this pandemic and we will continue to rely on public transit and transportation throughout Missouri and throughout the country. And without the support of not only the state government, but the federal government, we will see operators fail, and we can't let that happen. We understand these are incredible, challenging times for all of you. At Missouri DOT, we're here to help. I'm very thankful for our team, Michelle Kratzer and Joni Ressler. And, you know, so we kind of go back and forth. So Mokhtee, you mentioned that you've got some of the MoDOT team working with you now, and we've got some of your team working with us now. And I tell you what, it just shows the partnership. I think it's terrific when there are opportunities that open up in either direction, that we continue to make those opportunities available, because the whole system benefits from frankly, our competence, and it's our competence in administering a complicated program comes with working together and working through issues. So I want to thank Kim for her leadership with the association. I think she does a terrific job advocating. I hope that, and I look forward to joining together to make the case before the General Assembly and the governor's office for that budgetary support that I mentioned. And I hope that shows that MoDOT and the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission understand the issues of the day and are here to support your efforts. So thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Mark, thank you for your leadership, and everybody be safe and have a great rest of your conference. Thank you.
Patrick, thank you very much. We very much appreciate your partnership and all the work that you've done for advocacy in our behalf, and that's excellent news regarding the funding, and we look forward to the continued partnership. Want to remind folks that if you have any questions of our panelists, by all means, put them in the chat, and we'll bring those to the panelists toward the end of our session here. We now move from state funding to the status of federal funding for public transit. In March, we saw a significant win for public transit with $25 billion in funding through the CARES Act. That has been the result of a significant dialogue on Capitol Hill. Where transit funding goes from here, we'll find out. We have a resident expert with us today to provide an update. CTAA Executive Director Scott Bogren has been working with, writing about, and covering the community and public transportation industry for nearly 3 decades. That's a tremendous wealth of experience. His experience with CTAA begins with being editor-in-chief of Community Transportation Magazine. He crafts the association's various legislative, policy, and regulatory positions on Capitol Hill, and he shapes CTAA's communications, training, and leadership activities. While transit funding sources have remained relatively unchanged for the past 24 years, costs for transportation projects have gone up. Now, we do welcome Scott, and we look forward to your comments, Scott.
Thanks so much, Mark. And Director McKenna, it was great to see you in late February in what was a past life, I think, when we could travel and such, but at the Senate Banking Committee testimony. And I was really grateful that you brought up the Investments in Rural Transit Act that we worked with a couple of, in a bipartisan way, senators from the Banking Committee to try to increase flexibility in local share for rural transit systems. That is an important act that we do hope to get moved into part of the Senate reauthorization. On kind of what's happening on Capitol Hill, I'll start off with the obvious piece, which is any additional supplemental appropriations to respond to COVID-19. Indeed, CARES Act was just a godsend for all of us, getting that passed and so quickly. And you know, our partners at the FTA have done a great job, and Mokhtee and his team, as well as the team in DC, of getting that money obligated. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why that's so important right now. About 90% of that $25 billion has been obligated, and about 40% has been expended. But it's that obligation piece that's critical right now. So there's been a lot of talk about a second version of CARES Act, or an additional amount of funding. And certainly the news is all based on partisanship right now. And there's, you know, this little matter of a campaign and elections happening in November that is making it extremely difficult to get anything done. And it's always difficult to get something done in DC. It's even more so right now. Yesterday, Senator McConnell released what they viewed as their skinny proposal. That proposal has nothing in it thus far for transit, nothing in it for state DOTs, something that we've been following as well. But understand that that is really part of the Senate trying to exert its influence when, in many ways, over the last 2 to 3 weeks, House leadership has been negotiating directly with the administration. So it adds another wrinkle in, but it's certainly not an end point. And that's what I wanted to, what I really wanted to emphasize is that there's going to be a lot of discussion about this and a lot of people striking positions, and we'll wait until we get to real numbers. Personally, CTAA, we have asked the Senate if they're going to invest in public transportation to do so through the formula programs, because we think, one, that's the fastest way and most familiar way for all of us to flow funds through. And we have also asked the Senate to include Section 5310 operators who have not gotten anything through CARES Act in that. We continue to communicate that on the Senate side. What we're dealing with right now, we've got the HEROES Act that the House passed several months ago now, which was its version of CARES 2.0. That bill had about $15 billion in it for transit, but all of that virtually for the nation's 14 largest cities, which was a concern to us because, again, we think the formula programs are already there and based on people's size, based on ridership, and allow for any funding to flow throughout the public transit network and not just to a handful of cities. So we had some concerns with that. But there were other issues in that bill as well. The key, though, is the Senate seems to be moving around, even attempting to perhaps claw back CARES Act funds that have not been obligated. And that's why I raised that, how important it is that FTA has been so active in obligating those funds. We're in this weird point right now where you've got a handful of big urban operators who have spent the majority, if not all, of their CARES Act funds. And in New York and San Francisco, they have real needs. And we understand that. And we just want the entire transit community to benefit from additional funds. But at the same time, we don't want rural operators, smaller urban operators, state DOTs to be penalized because they're being cautious with the CARES Act funds, because they're spending them slowly and cautiously, because they want to make them last as long as possible, because we don't really know the economic fallout from this pandemic yet. I think we all have ideas about it, but that's the nature of smaller transit systems. We don't spend like money's burning a hole in our pocket. We're cautious, and we shouldn't be punished for that. So that's another piece that I see on that. Let's shift over to reauthorization. That was the topic that Director McKenna and I were discussing with Senate Banking in late February. And in the end, the House put a bill together and it passed out of the full House. It was initially known as the Invest Act. It was dovetailed into a group of bills and called Move Forward. Unfortunately, it was very partisan in nature. And so what you're looking at in Invest is really the Democrats' bill. The Republicans were not consulted. We always have a little heartache about that because we think better policy emerges when Congress works on a bipartisan fashion, particularly when it comes to transportation, which we think is a nonpartisan issue. But regardless, what we saw emerge in that act was positive. Now, it was massive increases across the board in the formula funds that all of you here rely upon, and in accordance with some of the AASHTO goals and objectives that Director McKenna raised, increases to 5311, 5307, 5310, major increases in bus and bus facilities investments, really raising that up to levels that we've wanted to see. There was some really important regulatory relief included in that. For many of you, I felt the streamlining that was outlined in that in Buy America was great and something that we've wanted to see for a long time. It really clarified rural transits and the charter regulations, and clarifies that rural systems aren't necessarily, as long as what they're doing is part of their normal operations and serving its normal populations, the rural systems aren't subject to the charter regulations. And we got some clarity put in that bill. So we were happy with it. Now, it passed the House, and now it sits. And now the Senate has not, and the Banking Committee has done its highway side, and the Senate is a little different. In the House, you've got one committee that does all of this. In the Senate, you've got Environment and Public Works that does the highway side, and then you got the Banking Committee that does the transit piece. The highway side's done. EPW on the Senate has got a bill. It's been out for 11 months now. Has bipartisan support. The transit bill, I know they're working on it. And the fact that we put together the Investment in Rural Transit Act with a Republican and a Democratic senator on the Banking Committee tells you we're working on that issue. And we think they may, this month, put together and put forward a Senate bill. But, and it's a very important but here, no one is talking about how are you going to pay for any of this? How are you going to pay for this massive increase in the House bill? And absent that, what that tells us is this is posturing right now, because no one's, Democrat or Republican, is going, nor the administration, is going to want to support the kinds of perhaps gas tax increases or new types of fees, tolls, and taxes right prior to an election. It's just not the way DC works. So yesterday we signed on to a letter that AASHTO, APTA, a lot of construction and engineering highway side types, we all signed onto a letter saying we'd like to see a 1-year clean extension of FAST. Clean means we don't get into any changes. You do not open the window to let in some and not others. A clean extension, critically asking as well for some additional funding to come to transit through a bonus appropriations. We'll see where that goes. We'll know a lot more in about 3 weeks, because once the Senate and House kind of close up shop here in DC in the month of September and get back to the districts and back to the states to do their campaigning, that's really going to put everything off until 2021. A couple of other issues I just wanted to raise before we get into questions. One, the House passed an appropriations bill for FY21 appropriations with a 53% increase in transit spending. When I got my hands on the bill and I sent it to some of my colleagues, they kind of choked and wrote me right back and said, "Is this real?" I mean, again, big increases. But there's 2 pieces I want to point you to, and I think particularly for smaller agencies, they're critical to keep your eye on. In both the House Invest Act and in the Approps bill, they extend the 100% federal funding for all formula programs in FY21. So that means local share, that thing that we know is going to be subject to the economic downturn more than anything else, will not be, it looks like, on the table in FY21. I got to tell you, from a lot of rural systems, we're hearing, and as well a lot of our small cities, that 100% federal may be actually more important to them moving forward than another tranche of CARES Act funds. That they're going to make their CARES Act funds go into FY21 and 22, but that flexibility and relief on the local share side is just as important. So we're keeping our eye on that. And last, just a month ago, mid-August, FTA announced the winners for the 5339B program, the competitive bus program. I hope some folks in Missouri were able to tap into those funds. The thing I wanted to point you to there is, in the last 4 years, we have doubled, literally doubled the amount of money in bus and bus facilities. So when you wonder, is Congress listening? Do they hear our messaging about where the needs really are in the transit field at the federal level? That is your best indication of yes, they do. When we have the right message, when so many of you are operating old equipment, older vehicles, when you're not able to replace your rolling stock along normal lines, they heard that and they've responded. So I think that, you know, as folks at Kim and her team, as we ask you to kind of talk to your members of Congress, not asking you to lobby. We simply want you to be able to accurately tell them what your needs are and what you need to safely and most cost effectively serve your communities. And we'll do the rest. And I think what you're seeing in those kinds of numbers is when we have the right message, we can, in fact, get Congress to respond. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a lot going on in DC for a time when we're all stuck in our homes, and you know, nobody's having meetings on Capitol Hill anymore. If you meet with members and meet with staff, you do it virtually like this. But the work is continuing, and there are a lot of important decisions being made right now that you know, are going to be critical to all of our future when it comes to being able to serve our communities. And I'll underscore what both Mokhtee and Director McKenna said. Thanks for all of your hard work in serving your passengers and communities over the last 26 weeks under very trying and extraordinary circumstances. You've all done amazing work, and thank you for all that. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, and thanks for your time, and thanks, Kim, for the invite.
Thanks, Scott. Go. Mark has a question. So Mark, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Okay, just a quick question, Scott, and thank you again for joining us today. And my question is the clean extension of the FAST Act. Just what is your best guesstimate or thought process about how likely that is? That seems to me to be of huge import, and I want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. You know, we asked for a full year. My sense is they never do that. Frankly, I've gone through enough of these to know that everybody's going to hedge their bets based on this matter of the election in November. And so I would likely see a 4 or 5, 6 month extension that will take us into FY21 and put some heat, which I think would be good, on getting a full reauthorization done as the top priority when the Congress comes in, the new Congress in January. Regardless of what happens at the presidential level, we think it's critical, and I know our partners at AASHTO are lockstep with us, that we get a 5-year reauthorization worked on immediately. And the reason I think it's so important is Congress has spent trillions of dollars off budget on COVID-19 response. And I know there is some future amount of buyer's remorse, and there's a equal and opposite reaction to all of that spending. We do not want to be working on on this reauthorization of all forms of surface transportation in the middle of that discussion. We want to get this done as soon as possible. So that's our hope. And I would bet 5 to 6 months rather than a year.
Thank you.
If I might, Mark, I tend to agree with Scott, but we really are pushing for the 1 year at AASHTO. The problem with the half-year extensions is we get apportioned apportionments. And for a transportation agency with multi-year, you know, what that does to me is knock me out of multi-year construction projects. It really, you know, when we have multi-year certainty, we do projects that have, you know, 4 and 5 times multipliers on the economy. When we have short-term and when we can't even obligate, for instance, you know, how do I obligate the Rocheport Bridge project, you know, which is going to be a 3-year construction project on 6 months of money? That just doesn't work. So we're really pushing hard. Certainly the longest I've heard in response to our push is 6 months. So I do agree with Scott that, you know, likelihood and trying to hedge what that might look like. But we continue, and I think what we're seeing is just lockstep, regardless of whether there are slight differences in policy between associations, between the differing areas. I would say all the associations are working together as well as I've ever seen it. And it is all with that notion on multi-year reauthorization. The good news to that is we have the groundwork is done. We have a Senate EPW bill. We've got a lot of work by all of the committees in the Senate that have to do that, including the Appropriations Committee. You're looking at on the House side although as Scott said, although a kind of a partisan effort with the moving forward piece, a lot of baseline work was completed there, and certainly the House Republicans on the T&I committee did their work too. They submitted proposals as well. So all the puzzle pieces are there for reauthorization. It's just political will and funding, which is what always stops Washington. But you know, we do need to press these issues because in light of the pandemic, it makes investing in the future of the nation's transportation network even more important and even more impactful as we dig out of the economic impacts from COVID. This is a great way to do it, and it's long-lasting investments, and specifically with public transportation, the investments that will help move our essential workers as they're getting back to work.
Thank you very much, both of you. With that, we really do appreciate everyone. Is there any type of question that is, I don't see any in the chat. I might not be seeing all of them though. I would like to thank Transloc and Citizens for Modern Transit, Commute Enterprise, and BYD for sponsoring this conference. We very much appreciate Mokhtee, Patrick, and Scott's participation in this panel. Scott will also be joining us later today for a panel discussion around transit's response to the pandemic. I really do hope that everyone has a great 2 days of learning and networking with others across the spectrum on transit. Transit will continue to deliver our essential service with your help. I want to thank you for your attendance, and I'll turn it back over to Kim for our next transition.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Patrick and Mokhtee. Thanks you all for getting up early and joining us this morning on a virtual platform. We are so happy to see your smiling faces, even if we're not in person. So we are going to take a 5-minute break right now. If you're an attendee, make sure to go back to the conference website and log into the next panel discussion, which will be on the question of 2020, to charge or not to charge, the transit fare discussion. So we hope to see you in about 5 minutes, and then we'll log back in and we'll have a great discussion about to charge or not to charge. Thank you, everyone, very much.